Member for Virginia Waters.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm honored to stand in the House tonight to speak to Bill 42, an act to amend the Electoral Boundaries Act, on behalf of the District of Virginia Waters. As many people in this House of Assembly know, the District of Virginia Waters, I believe, is actually the third largest district in the province as it sits today. So it gives me great pleasure to stand here and speak on behalf of every one of the constituents that I represent. I'm very humbled with that opportunity. And I think, Mr. Speaker, one thing that is consistent without a doubt from our side of the House, the government side of the House, and it's been referenced here on in many speeches that have already been made as part of this debate, is that part of why we're here is to ensure that the province is provided and the people of the province are provided with the best governance possible. And that governance certainly cannot come unless you have a very in-depth discussion and dialogue when you are making changes and suggesting making changes to the boundaries of the province and, more importantly, the representation of the people of the province. I think it's a very humbling experience, as the Minister of Education mentioned earlier. It is humbling to stand here in the House and speak to that. I think many of us as parents understand that the laws that we make in this House of Assembly and the decisions we make affect those of us that are coming in the future, and I'm very humbled to stand here and speak to this bill tonight. You know, the democracy that is intended to happen in this House of Assembly is very important, and as an MHA, I take that responsibility, Mr. Speaker, very seriously, and I have a tremendous amount of respect not only for my fellow colleagues, but certainly for you know, the ministers of the Crown, who wear a heavy burden, and certainly all of us in this House of Assembly understand that the work that's done here is, while oftentimes can be humorous in as we have our debate, the seriousness of the work I don't think is lost on any of us and has been referenced many times in the House. I'm also very confident that the members on both sides of this House are listening intensively to all the discussion that's happening around this debate. I think the members of this House of Assembly on both sides understand that these discussions will have important and impactful ramifications on the people of the province, and this is something that we take very seriously in our responsibility here as 48 elected members. But, Mr. Speaker, I have to reference back to the beginning of the debate when my honourable colleague from Burgeo-Poyle suggested that the discussion and this bill and government's action appear to be rushed. And one of the things that certainly has happened since last Thursday, when the Premier made his announcement about his intention to reopen the House, invite the MHAs to come back in and debate this important piece of legislation, was that it required all of us, all 48 of us, to spend a tremendous amount of time preparing for this debate. And like my colleagues on this side of the House of Assembly, who have spent hours and hours with our researchers poring over information and trying to get an even better handle on the historical implications of what has happened in the past around boundary changes, I'm confident that the members on the opposite side of the House, I'm sure, have represented their constituents with that same due diligence. And as we've gone through that process over the last 4 or 5 days, I can certainly speak to, you know, as a member of the House of Assembly who's going to celebrate her anniversary in a couple of months as being a first-year MHA, I can certainly say that in the last number of days I've been even more educated myself on the Electoral Boundaries Act, and I have a much deeper appreciation, and I believe, Mr. Speaker, those listening at home tonight would expect me to have a much deeper appreciation for not only the changes that government is proposing today, but also the implications of those changes, and that I should have a deeper understanding of the original bill that we are talking about amending, and that also that they would expect me to have, and all of us to have, a much deeper appreciation for the operational implications of the changes that we're talking about today. I listened earlier in the debate and feverishly took notes. I know many of my colleagues in the House of Assembly on both sides of the House listen and take notes as we have discussions. And I listened to the Minister of Finance talk about really this legislation and amendment and what Bill 42 is intent on doing is not really fundamentally changing the process. And he mentioned that, you know, this process, my understanding, has been done 6 times before, and now this is the 7th time. And, you know, with all due respect to my honourable colleague across the way, I would suggest, though, and certainly feedback from people who've reached out to me, is that the 7th time is actually being done in an election year. And for that reason, people have questions, because that is a fundamental change to the process, and people are questioning what government's intention is and why they want to change it in the middle of an election year. The Minister, as well as the members opposite, who, as I'm sure, have done all their homework in prepping for the debate, have assured us on this side of the House that Elections NL would have sufficient time to do this debate. However, you know, my question, and I would hope that at some point during this discussion, you know, the Minister of Finance or the Premier or the House Leader may be able to answer this question, is I would hope that as we work through, assuming government uses its majority to make these changes, that the operational implications that Elections NL won't be so large and create such discord that the people of the province that we represent here today will be impacted when they actually go to vote. Because I think that's a very serious consideration when we talk about changing the rules in how people are represented. As I said before, this has never happened in an election year. And it's interesting because, you know, I want to make it clear, and certainly many members of this House of Assembly, including my honourable colleagues on this side, including the Leader of the Official Opposition, have made it very clear that, you know, we support a review that would lead to a reduction in the number of MHAs that are sitting in this House. As a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, I had the distinct honour to represent the people of the province on a committee after Judge Green's report, the Members' Compensation Review Committee, from May of 2009 to October 2009, where we had, as a committee, the opportunity to have consultations around the province on the benefits package that MHAs are required to have here as part of their work in the House. And I can tell you, even though it wasn't in our mandate at the time, the number of MHAs in the House of Assembly came up in almost every single one of those presentations at that time. And, you know, this discussion about reducing the number has been something that's been talked about in the public for a long period of time. The Leader of the Official Opposition has talked about it for over 2 years. And certainly, the people of the province expect us to make decisions in this House doing the appropriate due diligence. It is our belief on this side of the House that the current proposal as it is presented in legislation in Bill 42 really is setting the Boundary Commission up for failure, and with unprecedented deadlines and really a predetermined 10-seat reduction. You know, the original legislation called for the Boundary Commission to begin its work in 2016, and as has been spoke about many times in this House of Assembly already, the 2016 date would have provided an opportunity for the Boundary Commission to be able to avail, I believe, my understanding is, of the most current census information. It was interesting, as I was doing my prep, I came across a submission that was made to a former committee that said, and I believe, I could be wrong, but yeah, my understanding is this was a submission made on behalf of the City of Mount Pearl. The submission says, It would be more timely and effective if the timing of the review was to happen 18 months after a census has been carried out by Stats Canada, and the new information from the census will be as current as is reasonably possible and would assist in determining more accurately the population of each district. So, Mr. Speaker, I believe it was the Deputy Mayor at the time who said that. I don't have the exact quote here, but I'm sure that people can check that out themselves. Deputy Mayor. Oh, yeah, okay. Mr. Speaker, I want to take up the last couple of minutes of my speaking time here tonight to talk about the comments that I've heard most of the members on the government side make. Many of them stood up with great confidence and talked about the fact that they believed that the Commission could do its work in a timely manner and that the amount of time that was prescribed in this legislation would be sufficient. And, I would argue, Mr. Speaker, that, this precognition or this future sight that the government members have on the other side, the ability to know the future, quite frankly, is flawed. I would argue that, the members seem to have an incredible ability to be able to see into the future, and, the people of the province, when they think about issues like the expropriation of Abitibi, Humber Valley paving taking place in one day, they really question what happens when this government rushes. One of the things I've learned as part of studying for this legislation is that every single jurisdiction in Canada who has been through a boundary change, the province that took the least amount of days to get the reports done was Ontario, at 185 days. And 185 days. The province that had the highest duration of days just to complete the report was Quebec with 5 years. And the numbers range from 275 days in PEI, 695 in Nova Scotia, 284 in New Brunswick, 185 in Ontario, as I've mentioned, 265 in Manitoba, 186 in Saskatchewan, 325 in Alberta, 275 in British Columbia, 275 in Northwest Territories, and 250 in Nunavut. Mr. Speaker, earlier the member for St. John's West spoke about the 9-month timeline being reasonable. And I would argue that in business, tight deadlines can be achieved by buying them and buying the results. This is not, many members on the opposite side of the House have said many times, government is not business. And those numbers I just read out are the other provinces' amount of days they used to get the report done. In addition to that, the days between when they had their election and when the report was finished, the lowest one is 380 days. That's Nova Scotia. A combined of 1,000 days in Nova Scotia to finish this work. Because, Mr. Speaker, it's not just about making sure that the boundaries are drawn correctly. As I mentioned in my earlier comments, it's about making sure that operationally, Elections NL can do its work. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance said earlier in this House, being informed is much more important than a calendar date. And I would argue that when you are speaking about democracy and you are trying to jam a schedule in such a short period of time, I think it's legitimate that constituents question why is the urgency? And I understand members of the opposite side of the House, I know, are all going to wave at me and say that this is about money, and this is about the amount of money that we can save. Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm also getting questions that, legitimate questions that members of the public are saying, well, why isn't the Premier able to take action on things that he can do right now, which is the parliamentary assistance? So, Mr. Speaker, Bill 42 is really about changing how fast this work is done. And people of the province And it's okay. The Minister for Child, Youth and Family Services can laugh all he wants there about this, but this is quite a serious issue. Seniors and wellness, oh right, he's been changed. That's right, they've changed a lot over there in the last year. The amount of money this government has wasted on changing cabinet ministers and changing departments
Order, please.
is something that we should be discussing.
Member to keep her comments relevant.
Mr. Speaker, this is a 20% reduction in the seats in an election year. This is unprecedented. And in addition to the work that I've done on the numbers, I'm sure other members of this House of Assembly, I know for sure that members on my side of the House have taken the time to actually speak to people who've done this work. And I have. I've spoken to representatives of commissions in other provinces. And as we've heard earlier this week, a former commissioner said that, from Newfoundland, said it was highly unlikely that this work could get done in time.
Order, please.
I spoke to another commissioner who said that to try to complete this work in this short period of time fundamentally means that we're disregarding, government's disregarding the ability for people to have consultation and input into this discussion. Mr. Speaker, let me be clear. I stand behind my leader and support him, as we all do. And everybody in this House, with the exception of the third party at this stage, has supported that we need to reduce MHAs. But how we do it is as equally as important as the decision we're making. And my constituents and people that have been talking to me are very concerned about this government's ability to get this done. The member from the District of Terranova said that this debate was about efficiency. Efficiency. I can tell you that my 11-year-old son, when he heard that, said, "Mommy, isn't this debate about democracy?" And I said yes. I said yes. It is. And you know what? The Minister from Child, Youth and Family Services can certainly mock the fact that my 11-year-old is interested in politics. But I think it's very important because, quite frankly, when you look at the math, the changes that we're making in 2015 will affect how the boundaries that he will be voting in. We are making decisions today as part of this House of Assembly that will affect voters in this province for 11 years. And while it's important to take action, it's equally important to make sure that those decisions are done in the right way. This government is grossly underestimating the operational work related to these changes. I would argue like they grossly underestimated the operational work when they laid off over 1,200 people several years ago. We spoke. Mr. Speaker, there's a litany of lists that we've asked questions about over the last couple of days regarding finances, and I certainly won't waste my time today, this evening, talking about that, because I understand the members on the opposite side are very interested in continuing this debate. But I can certainly say that, you know, when a constituent talks about, and I go back to the parliamentary assistants and the number of ministers in cabinet, you know, I had to say to the constituent, I mean, I can't imagine that what he said to me was right. That constituent said, do you think that this is the Premier trying to make sure that there isn't a caucus revolt? And I just said, look, I can't imagine that a person who sits in the Premier's seat would make a decision not to reduce parliamentary salaries.
To make her comments relevant to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Bill 42.
Mr. Speaker, the Deputy Premier and the Premier have spoke about better governance, and the people in my district are questioning the motive. They're questioning whether it's better governance, good governance, or quick governance. And, Mr. Speaker, people in the district, people across the province, have grave concerns about the ability for us to get this work done and this government to get this work done. So let me be clear. Mr. Speaker, the people of the province expect this government to keep its word. Every single one of them stood up today and the last couple of days and agreed and said that this wasn't about pushing off the election date. Mr. Speaker, I hope when we come back in the House of Assembly the next time after we close from this session, I will be able to look across the hall and say that every one of them kept their word. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.